The estate stood upon a gentle rise overlooking miles of green countryside, its stone walls glowing softly beneath the mild afternoon sun. Visitors often admired its grandeur, speaking of its elegance with awe, but few knew how cold life could feel behind its polished windows. To the world, Duke James possessed everything a man could desire. At 30 years old, he was wealthy, respected, handsome, and powerful. Servants obeyed his commands without question, society welcomed him into every distinguished gathering, and neighboring landowners sought his approval. Yet within his marriage, he carried a distance that no amount of wealth could conceal. His wife had lived at Manor for 4 years. At 22, she possessed a quiet beauty that escaped those who only valued dazzling appearances. Her chestnut hair framed delicate features, while her thoughtful gray eyes reflected intelligence and compassion. She was kind to servants, generous to tenants, and patient with everyone she encountered. Unfortunately, the one person whose affection mattered most remained blind to her virtues. Their marriage had begun as many noble marriages did, through arrangement rather than romance. Had entered the union hopeful that affection might grow with time. During their first months together, she had searched for signs of warmth in her husband's expressions, treasured brief conversations, and eagerly anticipated evenings spent in his company. James had never been cruel then, merely indifferent. As years passed, indifference hardened into habit, and habit built walls neither of them seemed able to cross. On most mornings, they shared breakfast in silence. James read correspondence while sipped tea and watched sunlight spill across the tablecloth. She often considered starting conversations about books she enjoyed or charitable projects she wished to support, but experience had taught her that his attention rarely lingered. When she spoke, he listened with polite detachment before returning to matters he considered more important. The loneliness settled gradually within her, like dust gathering in forgotten rooms. One evening, as a pleasant breeze drifted through the open windows of the drawing room, found James reviewing estate accounts beside the fireplace. She hesitated near the doorway. For weeks she had debated whether to voice the question haunting her heart. At last she gathered her courage. "James," she said softly. He looked up briefly. "Yes." She clasped her hands together. "Have I done something to disappoint you?" His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "You never seem happy in my company." James exhaled impatiently and closed the ledger. "This again." Her cheeks warmed, but she continued. "I only wish to understand. We have been married for 4 years, yet sometimes it feels as though I barely exist in your life." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then something sharp flashed across his features. Perhaps he was tired. Perhaps the pressures of responsibility weighed heavily upon him. Whatever the reason, the words that followed changed everything. "You are making problems where none exist." Lowered her eyes. "I am not trying to create problems." "Then what are you trying to do?" She swallowed. "I suppose I hoped you might care for me someday." The statement struck him with unexpected irritation. James rose from his chair. "You wish for honesty." She nodded. His pride spoke before wisdom could intervene. "Very well, you are too ordinary to be loved." The room seemed to freeze. Even the breeze felt still. Stared at him, unable to speak. The cruelty of the words hung between them like a blade. Immediately, James recognized the damage he had done. Regret stirred within him, but stubbornness crushed it before it reached his tongue. He had spoken in anger, yet apologizing would mean admitting fault. Instead, he turned away. Neither of them spoke again that evening. Afterward, something inside quietly changed. She no longer waited for him in the evenings. She stopped asking about his day. The hopeful spark that once brightened her eyes faded little by little. Rather than seeking affection, she devoted herself to useful work. She organized donations for struggling families, visited village schools, and spent hours reading in the estate library. The servants noticed the difference. Though she remained gracious and kind, a sadness lingered beneath every smile. James observed the change but misunderstood its cause. He assumed she merely needed time to recover from their argument. After all, she had always forgiven him before. Why would this occasion be different? Weeks passed. The weather remained pleasant, with clear skies and mild temperatures blessing the countryside. Life continued according to routine. James attended dinners, hunting parties, and social engagements throughout the county, accompanied him only when necessary. When she did, she carried herself with quiet dignity, never complaining, never creating scenes. Her restraint should have relieved him. Instead, he occasionally found himself unsettled by it. One afternoon, traveled to a neighboring village to assist with a charity fundraiser supporting local widows. The event attracted respectable members of society eager to contribute. Among the guests was a gentleman recently returned from traveling abroad. Was 28, well educated and known for his courteous nature. Unlike many men of his position, he listened more than he spoke. When introduced to, he greeted her warmly. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Your Grace. And you, mister." As the afternoon progressed, they found themselves discussing literature, education, and village welfare. To his surprise, seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. When she suggested improvements for the local school, he asked thoughtful questions. When she spoke about helping struggling families, he listened attentively rather than offering distracted responses. For the first time in years, she felt heard. Not admired, not flattered, simply heard. The experience was strangely comforting. Over the following weeks, occasionally attended charitable functions where volunteered. Their conversations remained entirely proper, yet each interaction reminded her how pleasant genuine respect could feel. Gradually, traces of confidence returned. Her smiles appeared more naturally. Her laughter emerged more often. Meanwhile, James remained largely unaware of these developments. Until one afternoon, returning unexpectedly from a meeting with neighboring landowners, he entered the manor gardens and noticed seated beneath a flowering tree. Across from her sat. They were engaged in conversation. Laughed at something said, and the sound carried lightly through the warm air. James stopped walking. The sight should have meant nothing. Yet for reasons he could not explain, irritation tightened his chest. He watched another moment as smiled, and his face brightened with a happiness James had not seen in years. Then a troubling thought entered his mind. Why could a near stranger draw a smile from his wife when he no longer could? For the first time, the question refused to leave him. The image of laughing beneath the flowering tree lingered in James's thoughts long after he left the garden. He told himself the irritation would pass, that it was merely surprise at seeing his reserved wife enjoying another gentleman's company, yet the memory remained stubbornly vivid. He could still hear the warmth in her laughter and see the brightness in her eyes. Those expressions had once appeared in his presence. Now they seemed reserved for someone else. Over the following weeks became a familiar figure within county society. His attendance at charitable functions often placed him near, and their friendship continued to grow. Their interactions remained entirely respectable. They discussed books, village improvements, and plans for helping struggling families. Nothing about their conduct invited scandal, yet James found himself noticing every conversation. What unsettled him most was Not's behavior. It was transformation. The quiet sadness that had shadowed her for months began to fade. Confidence returned to her posture. She spoke more freely during gatherings and seemed increasingly comfortable expressing her opinions. People responded positively. Men and women alike sought her company, drawn by her intelligence and gentle humor. James had spent years overlooking these qualities. Now others seemed eager to appreciate them. One evening, during a dinner hosted by a neighboring family, James overheard two ladies discussing his wife. "The Duchess possesses remarkable grace," one said. "And such kindness," replied the other. "She has done more for the village than anyone realizes." James continued walking, but the words followed him. Later that night, a gentleman praised charitable efforts. The following week, another guest complimented her intelligence. At every gathering, someone seemed eager to speak highly of her. The attention irritated him far more than it should have. He began noticing details he had previously ignored, carried herself with quiet elegance. She listened carefully when others spoke. She never sought admiration, yet people naturally gravitated toward her. The more he observed, the more difficult it became to reconcile these qualities with the dismissive judgment he had once delivered so casually. "You are too ordinary to be loved." The memory of his own words became increasingly uncomfortable. One afternoon, the estate hosted a garden party attended by local families. Guests wandered among blooming hedges while musicians performed near the terrace. James spent much of the event speaking with landowners about estate matters. As he crossed the lawn, movement caught his attention. Stood at the top of a small stone staircase leading toward the gardens. Offered his hand to assist her descent. She accepted with a grateful smile. A moment later, they shared a laugh before continuing their conversation. The scene lasted only seconds. Yet an unfamiliar sensation gripped James. Jealousy. The realization struck him with startling force. He had witnessed countless harmless interactions between them, but something about that simple gesture disturbed him deeply. His attentiveness highlighted every failure James preferred not to examine. Another man noticed when needed assistance. Another man listened when she spoke. Another man valued the qualities James had dismissed. For the first time, he questioned his certainty. That evening, he remained unusually quiet. After retiring to his study, memories surfaced uninvited. He remembered their wedding day. Had been 18 then, nervous yet hopeful, her eyes had shone whenever she looked at him. She had entered their marriage believing affection might grow between them. He remembered small moments he had forgotten. The books she recommended, the conversations she attempted to start, the evenings she waited for him near the fireplace. Each memory carried the same painful truth. She had tried. Again and again she had tried. He had simply failed to meet her halfway. As weeks passed, self-reflection became impossible to avoid. When invitations arrived for a grand London ball, James accepted without hesitation. Society's most prominent families would attend, making the event one of the season's highlights, accompanied him as expected. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Elegant gowns and formal attire filled the vast hall while musicians performed lively dances. James spent the early evening fulfilling social obligations. Then he noticed approaching. The gentleman bowed respectfully. "May I have this dance, Your Grace?" Smiled. "You may." James watched them join the dancers. The sight should have been ordinary. Instead, it held him captive. As they moved across the ballroom floor, he found himself seeing differently than ever before. The candlelight illuminated her features. Her smile appeared effortless. Her movements possessed a natural grace he had never truly appreciated. Men noticed her. Women admired her. And somehow, he had spent years convincing himself she was ordinary. A painful realization settled within him. The flaw had never been. It had been his inability to see her clearly. For the remainder of the evening, he struggled to focus on anything else. Days later, requested a private conversation. James agreed reluctantly. They met in a quiet room following a charitable committee meeting. For several moments, neither man spoke. Then broke the silence. "May I be frank, Your Grace?" James nodded. "You may." Regarded him steadily. "Your wife is an exceptional woman." The statement immediately stirred defensiveness. "I am aware of my wife's qualities." "Are you?" James's expression hardened. Continued calmly. "She deserves happiness, she deserves appreciation." James said nothing. "Forgive my boldness, but she has spent years offering loyalty and kindness without receiving much in return." The words landed harder than James wished to admit. "You presume a great deal." "Perhaps," replied, "yet some truths are difficult to ignore." Silence returned. Finally spoke again. "A woman can endure rejection only so long before she stops hopping." Afterward, James remained troubled for days. The conversation exposed fears he had refused to acknowledge. What if no longer loved him? What if he had waited too long? His anxiety deepened when he noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She no longer sought his approval. Her happiness seemed increasingly independent of his presence. She discussed future charitable projects with enthusiasm and confidence. For years, her world had revolved around him. Now she appeared capable of building a fulfilling life without him. The possibility terrified him. One evening, after returning from a dinner engagement, James walked through the estate gardens beneath a clear sky. The air remained pleasantly warm, and moonlight bathed the pathways in silver. Voices drifted from a nearby bench. He recognized them instantly. And neither noticed his approach. They were discussing village plans and future goals. Their conversation was innocent, respectful, and entirely proper, yet the sight pierced him unexpectedly. Looked relaxed, comfortable, happy. The expression on her face revealed a peace he had failed to provide. Standing unseen among the shadows, James finally accepted the truth he could no longer deny. He did not merely value his wife. He loved her. Deeply. Desperately. And for the first time since their marriage began, he understood exactly how much he stood to lose. As smiled at beneath the moonlit sky, James felt the full weight of his mistakes settle upon him, and he realized winning her heart again might be the most difficult challenge of his life. After recognizing the depth of his feelings, James discovered that understanding his mistakes was far easier than correcting them. For years he had built a marriage upon neglect, assuming loyalty would remain unchanged regardless of how little affection he offered. Now he faced the consequences of that arrogance. The woman he loved still lived beneath the same roof, yet she seemed farther away than ever. The following morning, James joined at breakfast earlier than usual. She looked mildly surprised when he entered the dining room before the servants had finished arranging the table. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." The conversation ended there. Once the silence would have felt normal. Now it felt unbearable. James realized that the distance between them had not appeared overnight. It had been created through countless missed opportunities, thoughtless remarks, and years of emotional absence. Rebuilding what he had destroyed would require patience. For the first time in his adult life, patience became his greatest challenge. Instead of retreating into a state business, he began taking interest in the activities valued. When she organized a meeting regarding village improvements, he attended. When she reviewed plans for charitable donations, he listened carefully. He asked questions and genuinely considered her suggestions. At first, seemed uncertain how to respond. She thanked him politely but maintained a cautious reserve. James could hardly blame her. A few weeks of effort could not erase years of disappointment. Still, he persisted. He accompanied her on visits to neighboring villages and observed how naturally people responded to her kindness. Children greeted her eagerly. Elderly residents smiled when she appeared. Families trusted her because she treated everyone with dignity. Each encounter revealed another quality he had overlooked. The more he learned about his wife, the more ashamed he became of his former blindness. One afternoon, while reviewing reports in his study, James found himself staring at the fireplace instead of reading. The memory of his cruel words returned once again. "You are too ordinary to be loved." The sentence now disgusted him, not only because it had wounded, but because it reflected the worst version of himself. That evening, he sought her out in the library. She sat beside a window with a book resting in her lap. When she noticed him, she closed it quietly. "Is something wrong?" she asked. James remained standing for several moments. Then he spoke. "I owe you an apology." Surprise flickered across her face. "For what?" The question hurt more than anger would have. There were too many possible answers. "For many things," he admitted, "but most of all for what I said to you." Silence settled between them. James forced himself to continue. "You asked whether I cared for you and I answered with cruelty. There was no excuse for it." Lowered her gaze. The wound remained visible despite the passing months. "I remember," she said softly. "I know you do." He took a slow breath. "I was wrong." The words felt inadequate. After all, how could a simple apology repair years of loneliness? Yet he offered it sincerely. "I am deeply sorry." Remained quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you." Her response was polite. Nothing more. No sudden forgiveness appeared in her eyes, no emotional reconciliation followed. The apology was accepted, but the pain remained. James understood why. Trust could not be rebuilt through words alone. It required proof. From that day forward, he focused less on declarations and more on actions. When society criticized charitable spending, James publicly defended her efforts. When important decisions affected estate workers, he invited her opinion before reaching conclusions. At dinners and social gatherings, he remained at her side instead of leaving her to navigate conversations alone. Gradually, others noticed the change. More importantly, so did. She began speaking to him more freely. Not as a devoted wife seeking approval, but as an equal partner. Their conversations grew longer. Occasional laughter returned. The progress was slow yet meaningful. Months passed beneath clear skies and pleasant weather. Then another unexpected development altered the course of events. Requested a final meeting before departing England for opportunities abroad. James and met him for tea at a small countryside estate. The atmosphere remained warm and friendly. After discussing his travel plans, turned toward James. "I believe congratulations may soon be appropriate." James frowned slightly. "For what reason?" Smiled. "Because you finally seem to understand what has been standing beside you all along." James glanced toward. She looked away, embarrassed. His expression softened. "I hope you both find the happiness you deserve." Later, when James walked toward the carriage, the two men spoke privately. "I owe you gratitude," James said. Appeared surprised. "For what?" "For helping me see my own mistakes." Considered the statement carefully. "I never wished to interfere in your marriage." "I know." I only wanted her to recognize her worth. James nodded. She does now. A faint smile crossed his face. Good. With that, he departed. Watching the carriage disappear into the distance, James felt neither jealousy nor resentment. Only appreciation. Had never been his rival. He had merely reflected everything James should have been from the beginning. Several weeks later, James invited to accompany him on a ride through the countryside. The day remained calm and bright. They traveled toward a quiet lake situated near the edge of the estate. The water reflected the afternoon sunlight like polished glass. When they arrived, James helped dismount. Together they walked along the shore. For a time, neither spoke. Then James stopped. There is something I need to tell you. Turned toward him. His heart pounded harder than it had during any political negotiation or social confrontation. I spent years believing strength meant never admitting fault. He looked directly into her eyes. I was wrong. The words emerged steadily. I mistook kindness for weakness. I mistook loyalty for certainty. Most of all, I mistook my own arrogance for wisdom. Emotion tightened his voice. You were never ordinary. Remained silent. I simply failed to see you. The honesty of the confession left him feeling exposed. Yet he continued. You deserved affection, respect, and partnership from the beginning. A breeze stirred the grass surrounding them. James stepped closer. I cannot change the past. His gaze never left hers. But if you will allow it, I want to spend the rest of my life becoming the husband you deserved from the day we married. For several moments said nothing. Then tears gathered in her eyes. Not from sadness alone, but from years of emotions finally finding release. You hurt me deeply, James. As I know, there were nights I wondered whether anything about me was worth loving. The admission struck him painfully. You never deserved that. No, she replied, I did not. For the first time, she allowed him to witness the full extent of her suffering. She spoke of loneliness, disappointment, and hope slowly fading beneath repeated rejection. James listened without interruption, without excuses, without defending himself. When she finished, silence settled between them once more. Then took a small step forward. I cannot forget everything. I would never ask you to. But I can see that you have changed. Hope flickered within him. And a gentle smile appeared. And I believe you. Relief washed through him with overwhelming force. Carefully, he reached for her hand. She did not pull away. Moments later, she moved into his embrace, and for the first time since their wedding day, neither of them felt alone. Years afterward, the people of Still spoke of the Duke and Duchess with admiration. Together they expanded charitable programs, improved village conditions, and transformed their estate into a place known for generosity and warmth. James never again affection from the woman he loved, never again doubted her worth. Often, while walking hand in hand through the gardens, James remembered the cruel words that had nearly cost him everything. Each time, he silently renewed the same promise. He would spend the rest of his life proving that the extraordinary woman beside him was loved beyond measure, and this time she knew it completely.